The young man paused in his steps. Turning around, his face flushed from blushing all the way to the tips of his ears. Fine, Luna. Epilogue. With the development of the country and the progress of technology, whether it's the issue of imposters in college entrance examinations or food safety issues, on the day of studying abroad, my sister, who was wholeheartedly seeking knowledge, suddenly changed her mind. She threw the suitcase into my hands and pushed me onto the deck. Her eyes were full of provoke as she looked at me, but she was shouting that she couldn't bear to part with Mom and Dad and wanted to stay and inherit the Yvonne family's pharmaceutical business. I immediately understood that not only I was reborn, but also my sister. In my previous life, I alone inherited the Yvonne family's pharmaceutical business and achieved both fame and fortune. However, my sister colluded with my fiancé Zachary and was driven out by me. As the ship was about to sail, my sister mouthed triumphantly, "Yvonne, this time just wait for me to drive you out." I couldn't help but sneer. Do you really think the Yvonne family's pharmaceutical business is such a great thing? Zachary on the side couldn't figure out the situation. Seeing his lover who had agreed to run away with him change her mind and go back on her word. At the last moment, he also got off the ship. Zachary's father's eyes went dark and he angrily questioned him, "Do you know what a rare opportunity this is? What's wrong with you?" Zachary remained silent and looked at Vivian blankly and persistently. "His father is just one of the managers of many pharmacies in my family. It's just that he is good-looking and has good academic results, winning my father's favor. In my previous life, my father thought he could rely on him and betrothed me to him early, attempting to let him marry into our family in the future to support the Yvonne family's pharmaceutical business. But my parents didn't know that he had long colluded with my good sister Vivian. Under the guise of going abroad to learn new management methods, he and Vivian lived a carefree life abroad like immortals. When they came back, how could he have the nerve to talk about freedom and love? Screw him. I was pushed onto the ship in a daze. Watching the ship leave the shore, my sister on the shore smiled triumphantly at me. Father was so angry that he covered his chest and scolded her. Mother, who was already reluctant to part with her youngest daughter, stopped him in front of her, and the two got into an argument. I sat on the deck in a daze and then realized that she was also reborn. In my previous life, under the tide of the era when Western medicine became more and more popular, the Yvonne family's pharmaceutical business declined sharply. A wave of going abroad to study new ideas and cultures rose in the country. Vivian clamored to go abroad to see the world and be a new woman of the times. She has been the treasure in the palms of her parents since she was a child. Even in such a situation, Father sold most of the shops and found connections for her to get the chance to study abroad. Afraid that she would be wronged, he took out most of the family property and exchanged it for traveling expenses. He also sponsored Zachary to take care of her. So, she and Zachary lived a happy life in a foreign country, while I alone supported the Yvonne family's pharmaceutical business that was only an empty shell left in the country. Later, when the war was raging, many shops couldn't make ends meet. My parents took away the last property and turned to go abroad to find their youngest daughter, but they were killed in a shipwreck on the way. And I was fortunate to sponsor a returned scientist and was appreciated by a noble person. I rose rapidly all the way and finally achieved both fame and fortune. When she and Zachary ran out of money and came back in a sorry state from abroad, she wore Western clothes and walked into the prominent Yvonne mansion with a visibly pregnant belly. The first sentence she said to me was, "Sister, you have made so much money relying on the Yvonne family, but you enjoy it all by yourself?" Then, holding Zachary in a suit, after delivering a series of speeches about freedom and love in front of me, she was thrown out by me. She and Zachary were lazy and good for nothing in those years. Neither of them had any skills and lived in poverty. But they firmly believed that I had snatched their things. They joined forces with my enemies and set a trap for me and shot me dead with their own hands. Sister, I will definitely support the entire Yvonne family. You must study hard. As the ship gradually set sail, Vivian's malicious and triumphant eyes looked straight at me from a distance. I smiled. That fool will never know that the opportunity she gave up is something that many people in this era can't obtain even if they beg for it. But now, it's all mine. As the ship sailed farther and farther away from the shore, under the reminder of the butler, my parents gave up arguing and remembered that I was pushed onto the ship. Mother tightly held her beloved youngest daughter, and father and mother looked at me on the ship whose face was about to be unrecognizable with some embarrassment and heartache. What they were heartbroken about was not me, but half of the family property stuffed in the suitcase. Seeing that there was no more change in the situation, the two said a few more words, then waved at me and turned around and left with their followers. I was completely unperturbed. No one knows better than I do what state the Yvonne family is in now. They secretly stuffed half of the family property in their youngest daughter's suitcase. After I took over all the family business and found that the deficit was difficult to make up, the two of them told the truth. At that time, father sat silently on the side. In the face of my anxious inquiries, he just said coldly, "After all, you are a daughter. You are useless. When you encounter a little problem, you know to come home and press your parents for answers." Mother always wiped tears and said, "Yvonne, your sister is alone in a foreign country. Those foreigners are so fierce. How can she not have money with her? As an elder sister, don't you know to feel sorry for your sister?" I was driven to desperation. I borrowed money from various banks, advertised in newspapers to find investors, and negotiated cooperation humbly. When I came home again, I found that the huge Yvonne mansion had actually been sold by my parents. The two people took the last property of the family, sold the mansion and servants, and boarded the ship to go abroad. Those dark and desperate days are still vivid in my mind. Vivian still thinks that what she inherits is a golden nest and a silver nest. This time, let her and her doting parents support the Yvonne family. When I picked up the suitcase on the ground and was hesitating whether to pick up the ship ticket, a hand with distinct knuckles caught the ship ticket that was about to be blown away by the wind. I looked up. The person was wearing a blue long gown and had gentle glasses. Among the suits and Western clothes on this ship, he was extremely different. When I saw that familiar face, I couldn't help but chuckle. What a coincidence! Significant improvements have been made. It is really a beautiful thing that we can change our destiny through efforts. It is worth our all-out efforts. At the same time, if you find that your rights have been violated, please don't give up. Stand up bravely and resist. Destiny will definitely favor those who are passionate and brave. The man was somewhat surprised. He handed me the ship ticket and asked a bit nervously, "Miss, do you recognize me?" I took the ship ticket in my palm and shook my head. "But now we know each other, don't we?" Rupert, a student studying in France. In my previous life, he was my dear friend and a scientist who developed antibiotics. He gave a gentle smile. Even though he was simply dressed, his tone was neither humble nor arrogant. "That's right. I am Rupert, a government-sponsored student from Chaozhou." Behind him, the setting sun was like blood, brilliant and dazzling. I narrowed my eyes and smiled sincerely. "Hello, Yvonne." Vivian's parents booked the two best suites on the ship out of love for their youngest daughter. Zachary also benefited from this. Now that Zachary didn't board the ship, the room next to me was empty, so I searched around on the ship. In the lower-class cabin, I found Rupert and gave him a reason to move there. "Miss Yvonne, I still can't remember that my father saved you." I sat opposite him. He had been entangled over this problem for half a day. "On May 20th last year, during the protest march on the Bund, your father was arrested and imprisoned. On that day, when he was being arrested, he pushed me. In my previous life, on the day when antibiotics were developed, we were drunk and happy. All the hard work was not in vain. The two of us drank all night with wine bottles in our arms." He wiped his tears and said that he finally lived up to his father who died tragically during the parade and finally lived up to his skills. After repeated inquiries, I realized that, as early as when I was still young, I had already received the kindness of Rupert's family. In that special and memorable year, the tide of new ideas was everywhere on the streets. Vivian had been studying in Western church schools since childhood. But I was different. I studied in a school for female virtues. Suddenly one day, a group of people broke into the school. The middle-aged man wearing glasses who led the group broke into the classroom and angrily rebuked the teacher who taught us to be obedient and humble. The country is on the verge of destruction. How can such decadent and unbearable thoughts still be passed down? Don't harm the next generation of hope for the country. In this world, men and women are equal, and everyone is responsible for saving the country. In a school where we read, regard father as heaven, obey husband after marriage, be gentle, virtuous and soft, and not resist, such rebellious words as equality between men and women appeared. The teachers screamed and the students were terrified. I only felt like something had broken free from its restraints and was urgently pushing out from my heart. Those days when I was suppressed at the bottom of my heart, bound by a ruler, and stuck by hair oil, living like an object. Only when I secretly read my younger sister's books and newspapers would I feel the hidden and unjust resentment, which suddenly burst out. Wearing a wide-sleeved long dress, I followed that teacher Theodore and joined the parade. My heart was burning like a fire. I shouted for equality between men and women and for rejuvenating the country through industry. I thought I was omnipotent. But in the face of the police coming from the governor's office, that teacher Theodore who led me out pushed me into a tea house in a hurry. He was in a flurry. His glasses fell to the ground and were crushed by a black leather shoe. In the end, he couldn't say a word to me. You were also in that parade. He looked surprised and then became a bit eager. That was the proudest thing in my father's life. Then he turned and said, but that's my father's kindness. I still can't live in your suite because of this. He was overly upright. No living for free. You teach me Western etiquette. The room rent will be regarded as payment. How about it? The place where you live now doesn't provide electric lights. But the room next to me is unoccupied and has power supply all night. Both you and I are people who want to study for the rise of the country. Those who do great things should not be bound by trifles. Are you right? Under my repeated persuasion, he moved into the room next to mine. Rupert was a good teacher. His English was pleasant to hear and he didn't mind that I had no foundation. During this month of floating on the ship, by the time we landed, I could already communicate proficiently in French. Only in this month did I realize that the ship I boarded was a wheel of the time sailing towards the future. On the ship, there were not only the future scientist Rupert, but also the future famous literary newcomers, pillars of industry, and masters of architecture. All people were full of hope and all people were full of fighting spirit. At this time, I was extremely glad that I could be one of these people. In addition, the assets prepared for Vivian also became the fund for me to support these future big shots. Life is made up of choices. But from this moment, I have realized that I will enter a vast world that I have never experienced before. I began to contact those shining thoughts. I began to break the old and the past. I and other overseas students read books and created newspapers. We discussed saving the country and we studied hard. During this period, I received letters brought by friends from home. Most of them were from my parents asking for that sum of money. The letter said, studying abroad should be self-reliant. One should not rely on family money and indulge in pleasure. At first, it was kind advice, but later it turned into abuse and threats. I didn't reply a word. In my previous life, at this time, they sold the house and the servants, took the money and ran away. In my previous life, at this time, they sold the house and the servants, took the money and ran away, leaving me alone to bear that huge debt. At that time, I realized why my parents who had loved their youngest daughter since childhood changed the family business of the Yvonne family to my name. I slept in the shop, was asked for debts, and was surrounded. I became the joke of the whole circle. My embarrassed appearance was photographed by my rival and even made the headlines of the newspaper. Finally, out of helplessness, I transferred half of the Yvonne family to the rival Song family to pay off the debt and fled to the concession alone to look for opportunities. Later, with the profit from antibiotics, I redeemed the Yvonne family and achieved later success. Vivian has an obsession with the prosperity of the Yvonne family. She will definitely not give up the current Yvonne family until her death. Poverty makes a couple's life full of hardships. I am very curious. In this state, how can she and the always self-interested Zachary work together to overcome difficulties? A waft of soap fragrance. Someone stood in front of me. Yvonne, are you going back to your country? I was flipping through the domestic newspaper and said without looking up. Yes, I have important things to do. Rupert sat down beside me. Is it more important than saving the country by studying? I looked up at him. Our country needs some people to save the country by studying, some people to shed their blood, and some people to be peddlers, factory workers, cooks, doctors, and lawyers. Many things can't wait for the future. I remember this time point. In 2 months, there will be a shortage of supplies at the front line. If I rush back now, I can still do a lot. Don't you feel sorry for this? I looked at the person in front of me. He was no longer as young and naive as he was on the ship. There was more firmness and confidence in his eyebrows and eyes. Feel sorry? Of course, it's a pity that I can't study in such a good school with them. But at least, I have been here. It doesn't matter. I have seen this beautiful place and learned what I want. I believe that one day, our hometown will be as beautiful as here. I looked at him. We are not separated. We are all working towards the same goal. It's just a temporary fork in the road. I need to turn first. Rupert, I will wait for your good news of research in China. His eyes trembled. He stared at me tightly. Then he suddenly turned his head and said behind his back, I will live up to your expectations. 06 I returned to my country and went to the concession with the only money left on me. At this time, the second wife newly married by a big shot in the French concession was extremely fond of the Gay brand fruit tea. At that time, many people tried to please the big shot's pillow person by catering to his preferences. As a result, the stock of this brand of fruit tea in the concession soared. In the later stage, it was even hard to get a share, its popularity even exceeded that of Wing on Textile Factory. At present, the price of this stock has just risen and has not been noticed by people. I put all the money I had left except for part of the fare alone. I returned home with a small bag. Looking at the gate of the Yvonne mansion in front of me, the hard-to-put-down hatred became real. It turned out that in this life, they didn't sell the Yvonne mansion. Yvonne is back. Come in quickly. Look at our eldest daughter. She's finally back. I was enthusiastically led into the mansion. My mother glanced at my bag several times and seemed to want to say something, but was glared back by my father. As I passed through the courtyard all the way to the main hall, there were only 2 or 3 servants. It seemed that the deficit still had an impact on the Yvonne family. Just as I was about to step over the threshold with one foot, a flying teacup suddenly smashed at my feet. With a bang, it broke into pieces. I remained calm and looked in the direction where the teacup flew. It was actually a little boy about 1 meter tall. Oh, dear grandson, what are you doing? When mother saw the person, she quickly ran over. She pulled the little boy over with difficulty. Looking at me, she said with a smile, Basil, come, call Aunt. Only then did I realize that my good sister already had a child so early. Who is the child's father? Only then did my mother's expression become a bit stiff. My father quickly pulled me to sit down and mother asked someone to take the child away. The child's father, of course it's Zachary. As I looked up, I saw Vivian, who was answering from the 2nd floor. She came down step by step from the 2nd floor and sized me up from top to bottom. As if there was nothing valuable on me, she then showed a sincere smile. Sister, fortunately you have a conscience and didn't spend that travel money. Since you're back, take out the money quickly. The Yvonne family is in urgent need of it. I looked at the person in front of me. She was still wearing Western clothes. Although it was out of fashion, she had powder on her face. But after all, compared with the smooth sailing in her previous life, she looked much older. I didn't answer her words. Instead, I asked, Are you with Zachary? As if she thought this was also something to be proud of, she straightened her back and said, Brother Zachary is now a son-in-law of the Yvonne family. In recent years, the Yvonne family has relied on Brother Zachary's support. Since you're back, hand over the money and there will be a place for you in the family. I looked at my parents on the side. Father, Mother, do you think so too? Father had a cold face and turned his head away without looking at me. In a cold voice, he said, "You are a returned student who has studied Western ideas. Are you still obsessed with competing with your sister for a man? Narrow-minded." Mother wiped away her tears. "Your sister is not easy. If she hadn't tied Zachary's heart in recent years, who could our huge Yvonne mansion rely on? It turns out that no matter which one goes abroad to study, in their eyes, only the younger sister is loved. But I am very curious. How did Zachary support such a large deficit?" I sat on the chair with a calm expression. "Once the money is given to me, it is mine. According to what Father and Mother said, this Yvonne family belongs to her Vivian. My engaged husband also belongs to her Vivian. I have nothing. The money in my hand can be regarded as my share of family property. Why is it yours?" "It's mine. Father and Mother should all be given to me." She rushed up but was stopped by Mother. The two exchanged glances, changed the topic, and softened their tone by several degrees. "Yvonne, I know you are angry at your sister and Zachary for being together when you were out. But Mother knows that you don't really like him." I looked at Mother. She still didn't know that whenever she needed me to give in, she would always coax me with this appearance. As for Zachary, I did like him. Like Vivian, Zachary studied in a church school. But because my father didn't like being too westernized, he usually wore a long robe at home. The dark long robe on the young man, paired with western gold-rimmed glasses, also had a bit of the spirit of a proud young man. At that time, I was like an antique leftover from the late Qing dynasty. Except for not having 3-inch golden lotuses, I had long hair every day, wore thick hair oil, and had a pile of accessories on my head and a long skirt on my body. In the whole family, even Mother changed into a cheongsam. Only I was like an anomaly. Father said that this was the orthodox style of the great Qing dynasty and the appearance of a lady from a great family. He originally wanted to offer me up, but unexpectedly, the emperor was overthrown and the Republic of China was hastily established. Even wearing a braid was a crime, let alone me, this old thing. So he quickly arranged an engagement for me with the son of the housekeeper. I was the abandoned object. At that time, I also heard the so-called new ideas, freedom and liberation. Father loosened his control over me, so I occasionally went to my sister's room to read her books and magazines. My sister's room faced the sun and had the best lighting. The window led to the garden outside. I sat in front of the desk and looked at it carefully. The young man holding a magazine passed by in front of the window. He turned his head, looked at me like this, hesitated for a moment, and gave me a copy of the magazine in his hand. He stood outside the window, among the roses. Holding the gold-rimmed glasses, his eyes looking at me were the same as looking at others, without any contempt. He told me, "Miss, this is the Freedom newspaper, founded by me and my classmates. I give you a copy. Don't tell anyone else." I nodded in fear and dared not speak. When I saw the person leave, I took the newspaper and returned to my own room. How wonderful that newspaper was! It said, "People are born free, born equal, and born with rights." It was like a shout that made every inch of my flesh and blood boil. It wrote about freedom, love, and human rights. It discussed saving the world, saving the country, and enlightening the people. At that time, I realized that such a thin body could emit such a high-pitched shout, such a thin body could be involved in such a great cause. But later, when he led my sister back, although he had returned from studying abroad, he seemed to have become much more decadent. As soon as he opened his mouth, he said, "As a woman, you should give up the power of the Yvonne family. Why do you show up in public? Such a large Yvonne family, how can it all fall into your hands? Vivian is your own sister. Even if you resent me, you can't hate her, can you?" Even after I asked someone to throw them out, he still stopped my car alone. He said earnestly, "Back then abroad, she forced me to be with her. I have always loved only you." It was despicable. That young man who founded a newspaper to save the country and respected others eventually became a selfish person in human skin. "Yvonne is back." I rushed back specially. The voice came from outside the hall. Zachary seemed to come in hurriedly from outside, wearing a decent suit and a gold watch on his hand. Looking at him, he seemed less humble. Among the tired-looking people in the Yvonne family, he appeared particularly high-spirited. Yes, becoming the head of the Yvonne family from the son of the housekeeper is really different from the previous life. His eyes fell on me, with a smile on the corner of his mouth. I always felt that his face seemed more beautiful than in the previous life. Yvonne. His eyes looking at me were somewhat eager, and he walked straight towards me. I got up but took a step back instead and nodded slightly to him. Zachary, sister is back, but she refuses to take out that sum of money. How can you? Zachary interrupted coldly. Shut up. The money belongs to Sister Yvonne. Although the Yvonne family is down and out, I can still hold on. Vivian's eyes were red. She looked at me resentfully, stomped her foot, and turned and ran upstairs. This was really novel to me. Between the two of them, it seemed that Zachary took the lead. In the previous life, Zachary was completely dependent on Vivian. Even when Vivian temporarily gave up studying abroad, he was willing to give up such an opportunity and choose to stay in the country with her. Sure enough, with different identities, seeing Zachary being extremely enthusiastic towards me, even father and mother changed their attitudes. My room was renovated and became the most luxurious room in the entire Yvonne family now. At night, mother also brought me a bowl of tremella soup. The light shone through the glass cover, warm yellow, making mother look extremely gentle. Yvonne, you've been away for so long. Mother is not without worry about you. Mother doesn't know. You have always been the most obedient since you were young. She stroked my hair and seemed to have aged a lot. When you were young, as long as your sister said she liked something, you would give it to her without hesitation. Mother has always known that among you two sisters, you are the most sensible and considerate one. Mother doesn't know how much money you still have, but don't take out that sum of money. My expression changed slightly, and suddenly I felt that the bowl in my hand was extremely heavy. In the previous life, could it be that mother didn't abandon me voluntarily? She took out a handkerchief. There were 2 gold rings in the handkerchief. As she stuffed them into my arms, she said, Mother only has these things left. The deficit in the Yvonne family is too huge. None of them can fill it. If you stay here, maybe your father will use you for an alliance. Take these things and go. The farther you go, the better. Suddenly, I felt my eyes moisten. The maternal love I have longed for all my life, could it be that I just didn't notice it before? I didn't accept it and lied to her, saying, Mother, I have money, a lot of money. It's just that it's all been invested. As long as I wait for a while for it to double, it will be enough for me to spend for the rest of my life. Mother was extremely excited and kept saying yes. Then she hurriedly walked out. I was holding a bowl and was about to drink when she took it away. She seemed a bit flustered and said with a smile, This is a bit cold. I'll take it away first. I didn't think much about it and agreed with a smile and went to sleep early. After turning off the light, I sat quietly for a long time. There were no footsteps in the corridor anymore. I pushed open the door barefoot. In the study, I stood at the door and heard Mother's excited voice inside. There is hope. That child has money, but she just won't take it out. After going out and wandering around, her heart has become wild. She doesn't know how to care about the family at all. Vivian said disdainfully, How much money can she have? Can she fill up all the deficits? In my opinion, it's better to marry her off directly. She said she bought something that will double in value. As long as we coax her well and make her take out this sum of money willingly, we won't have to look at Zachary's face anymore. Vivian, endure this for a while. Let's first make her take out all her money willingly. When we have her in our control, then we'll marry her off. Find a new son-in-law for Vivian at that time. Kick out Zachary, this good-for-nothing who only relies on his face. Relying on pleasing women to win business all day long. He really has disgraced the Yvonne family. Sure enough, I overestimated this family. But judging from the meaning of these words, did Zachary prop up the Yvonne family relying on that face? I suddenly remembered that before Zachary went abroad in his previous life, he was extremely popular in school. He was young, good-looking, and gentle and polite. He did indeed win the favor of many young ladies in school. But at that time, the Yvonne family was still relatively powerful. Many people were wary of Vivian's status. Usually, they just sent love letters and most of them did it behind Vivian's back. I didn't expect that with such a huge deficit, Zachary could manage to get by relying on that face. This is also a skill. I wanted to leave. When I turned around, I bumped into a vase beside me. I quickly held it steady with both hands, but still made a sound. Who's there? Seeing that the people inside were about to come out, the door next to it opened and a hand suddenly pulled me in. 11 The footsteps outside the door lingered little by little. The person inside the room pressed me against the wall. The two of us were extremely close. I could feel his body temperature. I turned my head aside and didn't look at him. The footsteps went back again. Only then did he take 2 steps back. Yvonne, you shouldn't have come back. With a bit of a wry smile, there was also a bit more affection in his gaze when looking at me. Why help me? Given your relationship with Vivian, wouldn't it be more in line with your interests to lock me up directly after I'm discovered? He shook his head and his gaze at me was deep. I had a dream of doing something wrong. My heart skipped a beat. Could it be that he was also reborn? This made me a bit curious. If he was also reborn, was he trying to defect? What kind of dream? He looked at me directly and then said, a dream of being sorry to you. I really didn't expect that a person like him would actually tell me the truth. Whether you believe it or not, in this life, I will definitely make up for you. I will never let Vivian take away anything of yours again. I will return the Yvonne family to you. I avoided his gaze and asked in reply. The child is 4 years old, right? As soon as I left, the two of them got together. Now they don't love each other anymore. If Vivian hadn't drugged me and had a child, how would I have betrayed you? After I took over the Yvonne family, I found that the Yvonne family was only an empty shell. But even if it's an empty shell, I won't let Vivian take it away. He looked pained, as if enduring an unbearable pain in life. Yvonne, you don't know how I've endured these years. I can't hold on anymore. Fortunately, you're back. He rubbed his temples, looking rather tired. Yvonne, although the Yvonne family is not as good as it used to be, it can still maintain basic operations. Since you're back, I want to return it to you. His words were sincere. As the son of a housekeeper, was he really without any ambition for the Yvonne family's pharmaceutical business that he controlled? Whether it was sincere or not, I accepted his offer. 12 I checked the account books of the Yvonne family in recent years. To my surprise, whenever the Yvonne family was on the verge of bankruptcy, Zachary could always attract an investment. The owners of the investments were often daughters of various industries. The Li family in jewelry, the Wang family in department stores, and even the Song family in the rival pharmaceutical industry. Zachary stood by my side, a bit uneasy. His explanation for these investments was simply friendly help. I didn't ask much. I took the olive branch he offered and, with his help, quickly understood the current situation of the Yvonne family. Since I got closer and closer to Zachary, every time I went home, the hatred on Vivian's face was so strong that it was hard to hide. Now my father said, can't you be more sensible like your elder sister? You only know how to be jealous all day long. Sure enough, you haven't read as many books as your elder sister. My mother also said, Vivian, you should be more sensible. Your elder sister has been giving in to you since childhood. Now she is running around for the Yvonne family. Look at your expression. How uncomfortable it makes her feel. Vivian was so angry that her face turned pale. Later, she simply didn't come down to eat. Once we passed by each other at home. She was leading a child and looking at me viciously. Yvonne, don't you think you've won just like this? Just wait and see. I just smiled and said nothing. After hearing this, Zachary behind me stepped forward with a livid face. Madam is in a confused state recently and can't even speak clearly. Hurry up and take Madam away. He turned to look at me and his tone was gentle. Yvonne, are you scared? Soon the opportunity came. Under the pretext of looking for opportunities, I set off for the concession and sold out all my stocks. That part of the assets tripled, just enough for the next plan. When I returned, Zachary was obviously a little impatient. Now you have a general understanding of the Yvonne family situation. Yvonne, how on earth should we solve this? I looked at him and said word by word. Sell half of the stores and use all the funds obtained to buy American ginseng. At this time point, soon American ginseng will be very popular. I really didn't lie to him. But he still had some doubts. Is it too much to sell half? I shook my head. It's not too much. It's not enough yet. I will personally contribute 3,000 silver dollars. Zachary looked at me with burning eyes. As soon as he heard me say this, he immediately followed suit. I was even more certain that he was reborn too. Obviously, he couldn't develop the Yvonne family. In his previous life, he and Vivian came back only after knowing that I had achieved great success. They didn't even know the history of getting rich. So, they wanted to use my ability to develop the Yvonne family. Then let's see who is using whom? 13 The stores sold by Zachary were soon acquired by a returned overseas student. However, the price was suppressed by 40%. Due to the urgent need for money, Zachary had to grit his teeth and agree. Soon the price of American ginseng doubled, and the profit brought was far more than half of the stores sold. He became even more active towards me and almost obeyed my words. So when I proposed to sell another part of the stores and use all the money to buy Western medicine tablets from the church at a high price, he did as I said. Will it double this time? I looked at him and played it coy. This time's profit is enough to buy back the entire Yvonne family. Then next I looked confident. Next, just wait. After successfully selling, redeem the Yvonne family. Then start our own pharmaceutical factory. In less than a year, we will be able to surpass the current Song family. He turned his back to me and asked, Really? Sure. If so, then you are of no use anymore. I was a little confused. Zachary, what are you talking about? Vivian pushed the door in and said arrogantly, Yvonne, the Yvonne family doesn't need you anymore. You can leave. What does this mean? Vivian, who asked you to come? I grabbed Zachary's hand. What does she mean? Zachary looked back at me, his eyes full of melting pride. What she said is right, Yvonne. So what if you are reborn? You are still as stupid as ever. Don't you really think I love you? He pushed me, and I fell to the ground. I shook my head in disbelief. It's impossible. I can create the Yvonne family. You love Vivian. What can she bring you? Vivian stood arrogantly aside. Sister, haven't you noticed? Father has given all the shares to me. That is to say, the Yvonne family is mine now. So what if you are talented? Aren't you still working for us? No, you can't do this. All the profits of the Yvonne family now are created by me. You can't drive me away. Zachary sneered. In our previous life, we also begged you. Didn't you still throw the two of us out? He bent down and pinched my chin. This time, it's our turn to throw you out. Sister, I said that in this life it's your turn to wander and beg. No, you can't do this. I am a member of the Yvonne family. I have the right of inheritance. I can sue you. My face was pale and I stubbornly argued. Vivian smiled and took out a letter from her bosom and threw it in front of me. Look, sister. Father and mother don't need you anymore. I looked at the letter of severing parent-child relationship on the ground with the signature and inscription of the clan leader. I clenched that letter and walked out of the Yvonne family. All I did was just to have nothing to do with the Yvonne family. 14 They thought I had no money and wanted to see me in a downfall. But Zachary will soon find out that all the Yvonne family stores he sold at a low price were sold to a person named Rupert. And at this moment, Rupert and I can finally meet formally. Yvonne, you. As soon as you returned to the country, you gave me so much money and bought so many stores all at once. What on earth do you want to do? I sat opposite. Everyone is extremely happy when they get money. Why are you not happy but anxious when there are so many more assets under your name? Don't tease me anymore. I feel uneasy having these things of yours with me. I stopped laughing and looked at him seriously. All right. Next, we still have very important things to do. Suddenly, a sensational news emerged in the country. Chinese people have successfully developed antibiotics and no longer need to rely on imports from the West. In just 1 month, Guangming Pharmaceutical Factory, with its large-scale production and exclusive supply of antibiotics, has developed rapidly, and within this month, the Yvonne family has rapidly declined. The reason is simple. After the batch of drugs purchased from the church was sold, a large number of people experienced symptoms such as diarrhea and vomiting after taking the drugs. The Yvonne family was charged with defrauding consumers, and the actual equity controller Vivian and general manager Zachary were taken away for trial. After learning about this, my father and mother gritted their teeth and sold the ancestral house to redeem them from prison. This is the news in the corner of the newspaper on the issue where I was reported in my previous life. Zachary and Vivian don't know. If my father and mother read the newspaper when boarding the ship, they could also see the tragic situation of abandoning their eldest daughter and this news. But they didn't. Now, in addition to having to pay high compensation, a large number of drugs are stuck in their hands. The Yvonne family will find it difficult to turn around this time. When we met again, the main store of the Yvonne family's pharmacy was taken over by Rupert. It wasn't until I sat opposite them that he realized I had deceived him. It's you. You clearly knew there was a problem with the drugs sold by the church, but you deliberately asked us to buy them. Yvonne, you are so vicious. I raised my eyebrows and chuckled lightly. Yes. But Zachary, why do you think that I, who have been reborn, would still be interested in you? People like him who are selfish and self-interested can't possibly have love. What he loves is only the industry of the Yvonne family. Coincidentally, so do I. I thought you trusted me. I looked at him sideways. Those words in the study were actually colluded by you and them, right? He couldn't understand why he had lost and asked. How did you figure it out? Because you overestimated my parents' love for me. If it weren't for wanting to use me to restore the Yvonne family, my father and mother would take my money in a more direct and straightforward way or marry me off. They would never use the method of boiling a frog in warm water on me. Because they never affirm that I have future value. As much as they can take from me, they will think that's all I'm worth. He seemed unable to accept such a result. He began to keep saying to the air that he wanted to start over, he wanted another chance. This time, he didn't want to have any relationship with Vivian anymore. He didn't want to give up going abroad for her. He said that I clearly liked him. He had seen it a long time ago. He made the wrong choice again. He will definitely choose me next time. In his state of raving nonsense, Rupert had someone take him away. I didn't completely destroy the Yvonne family. I heard that after taking the remaining money after paying the compensation, the whole family moved into an alley. If they were a bit more diligent, survival would hardly be a problem. However, these people have lived a pampered life all their lives. Suddenly being squeezed into a narrow alley, their latter half of life is probably not going to be easy. Later, my father and mother came to me several times, trying to play the emotional card. But they were left speechless by the letter severing our relationship that I showed. They wanted to expose me to the newspaper but found that those newspapers simply didn't believe their words. Because the authors, literary giants, or business rookies that the newspapers competed to please and interview were all funded by me. Rupert and I developed the pharmaceutical industry together as before. This time, because of early research and development, we provided a large amount of antibiotics to the front line and saved many lives. And those talents I once invested in, after returning to the country, shone brightly in their respective fields and became loyal shareholders of Guangming Pharmaceutical Company in various ways. A long time later, during a store inspection, I saw Vivian lining up with a child in her arms at a pharmacy. She looked haggard. The child in her arms was only 2 or 3 years old, and there was no one else beside her. When she saw me, she turned around with the child in her arms. "What's wrong?" Rupert beside me asked. I shook my head. I thought I saw an old acquaintance. Let's go. Those great writers are still waiting for us to discuss the sections of this issue of a Guangming newspaper. I left with a smile, together with him. Now, I am also a person who creates newspapers to save the country. The end.